New Jersey was never the cheap move, it was the calculated trade. You paid more, but you got something back. Stronger schools in many districts, shorter commutes to major job centers, reliable infrastructure, and that uniquely Jersey advantage of being close to almost everything that matters. Manhattan one way, Philly the other, beaches in reach. Airports, ports, logistics, healthcare corridors, universities, and a deep bench of employers within an hour. For decades, the story was simple. New Jersey real estate might be expensive, but it was sturdy. A place to park your life savings and sleep at night. The Garden State didn't always lead the country in price growth, but it didn't scare people either. It was supposed to be the safe market. In 2026, that old certainty is starting to break. Not with a dramatic headline crash everywhere. Not with fire sale prices on every block. Something quieter is happening, and in a lot of ways, something more dangerous. A slow fracture in the belief system. A creeping realization that even in New Jersey, even in the towns people used to call bulletproof, the math can stop working. You can see it in the small signals that most people ignore until they stack up. Homes sitting longer than they used to. Price reductions that would have been laughed off 2 years ago. Buyers backing out after inspection because the repair list isn't cute old house character anymore. It's a second mortgage. Sellers quietly admitting they missed the peak. Agents trying to keep a brave face while changing the language. Less, best, and final. More, bring offers. This isn't a doomsday speech. New Jersey isn't falling into the ocean, and the entire housing market isn't imploding overnight. But the era of easy assumptions is over. In 2026, you don't buy a New Jersey home just because it always goes up. You buy because the numbers work for your life, your income, your risk tolerance, and your time on a horizon. Because here's the truth. Today's housing market is less about what a home costs and more about what it carries. The sticker price is only the entrance fee. After that comes the monthly burden, mortgage rates, property taxes that can feel like a second rent payment, insurance that keeps climbing, HOA fees in condo markets, maintenance on aging housing stock, and climate-related risk that changes premiums and buyer behavior. So today, we're breaking down 10 New Jersey cities where that burden is starting to show up in real-time places where the housing market is sending early warning signals. Some are commuter hubs, some are shore towns, some are older industrial cities trying to reinvent themselves. All of them are flashing signs that buyers should take seriously. If you're house hunting, investing, or just trying to understand where things are headed, this isn't about fear, it's about preparation. When a market shifts, the people who do best aren't the loudest. They're the ones who see the change early, run the numbers honestly, and refuse to buy a story instead of a deal. Let's get into it. Number 10, Hoboken. Hoboken has always been one of the cleanest pitches in American real estate. Manhattan access without Manhattan logistics, skyline views, walkable streets, restaurants packed on a Tuesday, and that quick transit line that makes your commute feel almost civilized. For years, Hoboken wasn't just a town, it was an upgrade path. The place you moved when you wanted city energy but needed a little more space, or when you wanted the lifestyle without the full NYC price tag. During the boom, the pricing got ahead of itself. Tiny condos with huge numbers, older walk-ups priced like luxury assets, new towers selling the dream rooftop decks, doormen, gyms, lounges, everything you can photograph and sell online. A lot of buyers did what people always do in a hype market. They assumed their future income would catch up. Promotions, bonuses, rent growth, resale value, the classic I'll grow into it mentality. In 2026, reality is punching through the marketing. Higher mortgage rates turn those purchase prices into serious monthly obligations. And in Hoboken, the monthly carry is the whole game. Your mortgage is only the start. Add property taxes, then HOA fees that can rival rent in other towns. Add special assessments, elevator repairs, facade work, roof replacements, mechanical systems that age all at once in big buildings. Even well-managed buildings can surprise you. What changed is buyer behavior. When money was cheap, people bought the address. In 2026, they buy the spreadsheet. Units that used to disappear over a weekend are now sitting while buyers calculate the full cost of ownership. And once buyers start thinking that way, the market gets more honest. That's not a collapse, but it is a shift. Hybrid and remote work is also quietly eating into Hoboken's advantage. Hoboken shines when you commute 5 days a week. When you're only going in 2 days a week, the premium for being 10 minutes closer starts to look expensive. That pushes some demand outward. Buyers start eyeing bigger places farther west or deeper into Jersey where their dollars stretch. Rent dynamics matter too. When landlords can't push rents higher without resistance, the investor math gets tighter. And when renting looks like a smarter short-term move than buying, demand for ownership cools. The point is not that Hoboken becomes undesirable, it's that Hoboken becomes sensitive. In high-priced condo markets, small changes in rates and fees can create big changes in value. Hoboken doesn't need to crash to hurt people. It just needs to stop being effortless. Number 9, Manasquan. Manasquan sells a different kind of dream. It's the shore town version of success, charming downtown, beach access, a mix of year-round life and seasonal energy, and train connections that keep New York money in the conversation. For a lot of people, buying in Manasquan is emotional. It's memory, it's identity, this is the life I promised myself. During the run-up, those emotions got priced into the market. Homes that used to be owned by local families increasingly became second homes, investment properties, or seasonal escapes. The market started to lean harder on outside income people buying with city paychecks, cash-out gains, or investor expectations. In 2026, the stress isn't always visible in the listing photos. It shows up in the carrying costs and the risk profile. Coastal insurance has become a serious factor, not a footnote. Flood maps matter, storm patterns matter. Even if a home never takes on water, the broader risk category can reshape premiums and lender requirements. Buyers fall in love with a cottage near the beach, then get the insurance quote and realize the real monthly cost is nowhere near what they expected. Maintenance is another quiet killer. Many shore homes are older and were never designed for the level of year-round use buyers now expect. Salt air is unforgiving. Roofs, siding, decks, HVAC systems, everything ages faster. Repairs don't get cheaper just because the home is cute. Then there's the seasonal volatility. A shore town can look like easy money when tourism is strong, but investors are now dealing with tighter, short-term rental rules in many places, more professional competition, higher cleaning and management costs, and a consumer who's more price-sensitive than they were during the post-pandemic travel surge. So what happens? Listings sit a little longer. Price cuts start small, then stack up. Sellers test the market and learn that 2021 optimism doesn't automatically translate into 2026 offers. Manasquan will always be special in July. But in 2026, buying there means owning the whole package. Nostalgia, coastal risk, high carry costs, and a demand base that can be thinner than it looks in peak. Season. Number 8, Hackensack. Hackensack's appeal has never been glamorous. It has been practical: county seat, courthouse, and hospital employment, access to New York, and a steady rhythm of renters and commuters. For years, that made Hackensack feel stable, a place you didn't brag about, but didn't worry about either. During the boom, even practical turned into hype. Investors chased anything near transit. Renovated 2- and 3-family homes started trading like growth assets. New mid-rise development kept coming, and easy financing made it look like a forward-only story. In 2026, Hackensack is feeling the downside of expansion. More supply changes the power dynamic. When you have wave after wave of new apartments and mixed-use projects, it's great when demand is exploding. When demand cools, landlords start competing. Concessions show up. Free months, parking deals, waived fees. That helps renters, but it pressures resale values and investor cash flow. For buyers, the squeeze comes from stacked carrying costs, higher mortgage rates, rising taxes, HOA fees in newer buildings, and insurance that's increasingly sensitive to flood risk in certain areas. Hackensack's river proximity is a feature until it becomes a premium and a worry. Buyers get more cautious when they see flood map complexity, basement moisture issues, or older infrastructure that doesn't drain well during heavy storms. Hackensack isn't a disaster story, it's a margin story. In 2026, thin margins break first, and a market that was treated like an automatic win becomes a market where you need a safety cushion. Number 7, Trenton sits in a powerful location, a capital city positioned between 2 major metro economies. On paper, that should support stability. In practice, Trenton shows what happens when older housing stock, uneven neighborhood conditions, and economic challenges collide with expensive borrowing. In the last cycle, investors flooded in looking for cash flow. Lower prices compared to suburban New Jersey looked like opportunity. The assumption was that rental demand would carry everything. Some investors did fine, especially those who bought early and managed well. Others are now dealing with the reality. Rising maintenance costs, higher insurance, and tenants squeezed by inflation who cannot absorb endless rent increases. Owner-occupants face a different problem. The affordable homes often need work, serious work. Roofs, wiring, plumbing, heating systems, lead paint remediation. In a high-rate environment, first-time buyers have less leftover cash after closing. Renovations get delayed, and delayed maintenance compounds. This creates instability. Properties bounce between rentals, vacancies, and distressed resales. Neighborhood comps become inconsistent. Appraisals get harder. Lenders tighten. Buyers who wanted to believe in the comeback narrative start choosing surrounding townships where the risk feels easier to manage. Trenton also carries reputation weight. Even when real progress happens block by block, perception changes slowly. That perception shows up as fewer offers, tougher negotiations, and less willingness to pay up. In 2026, Trenton isn't a market you casually bet on. It's a market you enter with a plan, reserves, and a realistic timeline. Number 6, Paterson has history and density old mill buildings, generations of immigrant communities, and a location that makes it a natural candidate for redevelopment pressure. During the last housing cycle, Paterson was framed as a value play near New York access without New York prices. That pitch attracts investors every time. But the trade-offs are sharper in 2026. Safety concerns, whether they're statistically changing or not, remain central to buyer psychology. And psychology moves markets. If buyers hesitate to walk a neighborhood at night, you don't get premium offers. Lenders and insurers are also more sensitive to perceived risk, especially on multifamily buildings. Carrying costs here can be brutal because the housing stock is old. Many multifamily properties need major capital. Heating systems, insulation, windows, roof work, masonry, electrical upgrades. Landlords are squeezed between the cost of upgrades and tenant incomes that can't keep pace. Some defer maintenance, and deferred maintenance drags down neighborhood quality, which drags down pricing power, which makes upgrades even harder to justify. It's a loop. Redevelopment near key landmarks and corridors brings hope, but it can also create a patchwork market. Shiny new buildings next to struggling blocks. Investors who expected a smooth appreciation curve discover volatility instead. In 2026, Paterson's risk isn't one dramatic collapse, it's the slow grind of expenses, perception, and inconsistent demand. Number 5, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is connected to everything. Port activity, highways, the airport, major transportation arteries. That connectivity helped fuel demand during the boom. Compared to some neighboring towns, it looked like value. Multifamily homes, smaller single families, and transit access condos climbed fast. Now the market is showing strain. A lot of three-family deals that looked great when rates were low don't look as clean at today's financing cost. Vacancies last longer. Repairs cost more than planned, taxes don't get friendlier, and the everyday realities, traffic, noise, air quality become more important when buyers have options. In 2026, buyers aren't just paying for a house, they're paying for daily living conditions. If two towns cost nearly the same monthly, people often choose the one that feels calmer, cleaner, easier. That subtle preference shift pulls demand away from certain streets and submarkets. Insurance can also spike around industrial adjacent zones and flood-prone pockets, even if a specific home isn't directly threatened. And as nearby towns in Union County invest in downtowns and transit-oriented development, Elizabeth is facing more internal competition. Buyers who used to accept the grip for the price are rethinking the bargain when the price gap narrows. For longtime owners, Elizabeth may still represent equity and upside. For new buyers who came in near peak pricing, 2026 becomes a test of staying power. Number 4, Camden. Camden is often used as the extreme example of decline, and that reputation has always created a strange dynamic. Deep discounts that attract investors, plus redevelopment projects that create pockets of optimism. Waterfront improvements, university growth, and institutional investment have made certain corridors look completely different than they did years ago. But the housing market is still walking a tightrope. Owner-occupants often face homes that need major work and limited access to renovation-friendly financing. Traditional lenders can be conservative. Some buyers turn to higher-risk funding structures that become dangerous in a cooling market. Investors learn quickly that property management here isn't passive income. Turnover, vandalism, non-payment risk, and high repair costs can crush a spreadsheet. When that reality meets higher borrowing costs, some portfolios become too heavy to hold. Camden also suffers from inconsistent pricing. One renovated home sells at a number that looks shockingly high. A few blocks away, a similar property sits unsold for months. That inconsistency makes appraisals difficult and creates buyer hesitation. In 2026, Camden is a market where the margin for error is thin and the need for local knowledge is non-negotiable. Number 3, New Brunswick. New Brunswick wears multiple identities: college town, healthcare hub, commuter rail city. For years, that combination supported the idea of constant demand. Investors leaned on students and hospital workers. Owners repositioned properties for higher rents. Prices climbed quickly as each sale reset the next. In 2026, the cooling shows up as a steady fade rather than a collapse. More listings appear as landlords decide the turnover and maintenance burden isn't worth it at today's pricing and financing. Renovation projects that once penciled out at higher valuations now look marginal. Owners who bought near peak are realizing they can't easily exit without giving back gains or worse. Student housing is a key pressure point. Purpose-built student buildings compete directly with older duplexes and triplexes that used to thrive on undergraduates. When tenants choose newer amenities, older units have to discount, upgrade, or sit. And when they sit, the carrying costs, especially taxes, hurt fast. For owner-occupants, New Brunswick can be exciting, but it can also be exhausting. Parking challenges, constant movement, changing neighborhood feel depending on the academic calendar. Some buyers decide it's not where they want to raise a family long-term. In 2026, New Brunswick is still a strong city, but it's becoming more block by block. The idea that anything near the train or the hospital is guaranteed is weakening. Number 2, Newark. For years, Newark has been marketed as the big comeback. Major employers downtown, transit infrastructure, the airport and port driving economic activity, new restaurants, galleries, and renovated buildings selling a modern identity. Investors and buyers believed they were getting in early, catching the next wave before it was obvious. Prices rose quickly in specific neighborhoods, especially near transit and new development. A few streets transformed fast. But Newark has always been a city of contrasts, and in 2026, that unevenness becomes a volatility engine. Higher mortgage rates have thinned speculative buying. Some condo and loft projects aimed at premium renters are now offering incentives after units sit longer than expected. Landlords who renovated for top-dollar rents are learning that not everyone can or will pay a premium just because the narrative says the city is hot. When renters push back, cash flow gaps appear. Taxes and insurance are heavy here, and those costs don't care about your optimism. Combine them with older building maintenance and the monthly outlay can look intimidating. The deal that seemed exciting at 3% financing can feel risky at 7%. Transit remains a strength, but it's no longer an automatic trump card. Remote work softened the value of being closer to Manhattan 5 days a week. Some buyers are willing to live farther out if they only commute occasionally. Newark's trajectory may still be upward over the long arc, but in 2026, it's not a straight line, and not every project will be rewarded. Number 1, Jersey City. Jersey City has been sold as the definitive alternative to Manhattan. Skyline views, fast transit, modern towers, and the promise of big city energy without big city pricing. For a while, the promise delivered. Development exploded along the waterfront. Older neighborhoods renovated quickly. Rents and sale prices climbed as the story repeated itself, the sixth borough. In 2026, that story is losing its hypnotic power. Condos that once triggered bidding wars now linger, while buyers run the numbers at today's rates. Investors who bought small units for corporate stays or short-term strategies are facing softer demand and more scrutiny from boards and regulations. The gap between ownership cost and rental income has tightened and in some cases flipped negative once you factor in HOA fees and taxes. Inside the towers, carrying costs are relentless. Amenities aren't free. Elevators, lobbies, security, HVAC systems, and facade maintenance eventually demand assessments. A unit that felt manageable when rates were low can feel like a trap when the mortgage, taxes, and monthly fees stack up. Inland neighborhoods that rode spillover demand have their own headwinds. As prices rose, longtime residents felt squeezed. New buyers paying top dollar become more sensitive to quality of life factors, noise, parking, schools, and the difference between marketing and lived experience. When expectations outrun reality, you get faster resales, tougher negotiations, and weaker price momentum. Jersey City is not done. It remains desirable, but it is a high-cost, high-rise market, and those markets are fragile when financing conditions change. When the spell breaks the belief that you can't lose values, don't need to crash to hurt people. They just need to stop climbing while your costs keep climbing. That's why Jersey City sits at the top of this list. It's the place where the gap between the story and the spreadsheet has become impossible to ignore. So, what does this New Jersey tour really tell us? It tells us the boom didn't just raise prices, it raised expectations. It convinced people that stretching was normal, that risk was temporary, that carrying costs would always be manageable, that demand would always bail you out. In 2026, the market is forcing a reset, not just in price, but in mindset. Higher rates change affordability, higher taxes change monthly reality, higher insurance changes who can buy and what they'll tolerate. Climate risk changes buyer psychology. Safety concerns, school quality, commute value, and job stability all matter more when money is expensive. If you're thinking about buying in any of these cities, understand what you're really choosing. You're not just buying a home, you're choosing a risk profile. You're choosing how exposed you are to rate sensitivity, how vulnerable you are to taxes and insurance climbing, how dependent you are on rent growth or resale appreciation, how much neighborhood volatility you can tolerate, how much repair risk you can carry if the inspection turns ugly, how long you can hold if the market goes flat. This is where disciplined buyers separate themselves from emotional buyers. A disciplined buyer doesn't panic. He doesn't chase. He doesn't let the listing description do the thinking for him. He asks harder questions. What's the all-in monthly cost, and how does it compare to renting? What happens if my income stalls for a year? What happens if property taxes rise again? What happens if insurance premiums jump? What happens if this takes longer to sell than I expect? If the market goes sideways for 5 years, does this still make sense? Because in this market, safety isn't a zip code. Safety is margin. And the biggest mistake people make in a shifting market is assuming the last cycle's rules still apply. New Jersey is still New Jersey. The state still has location advantages most places can't replicate. But the old guarantee, the idea that stretching here is always rewarded, has cracked. The opportunity now is for the buyers who respect risk, do the math, and buy for the right reasons. If you want to stay ahead of a turning market, don't wait for the headlines. The headlines arrive after the money has already moved. Watch the small signals, track the days on market, pay attention to concessions. Notice when sellers stop bragging and start negotiating. That's where the truth lives in 2026. And remember, this isn't only a New Jersey story. The same pressure rates, insurance, taxes, affordability shows up across the country. New Jersey just makes it easy to see because the costs are already high and the margins were already thin. If you're watching from New Jersey, tell me what you're seeing where you live. Longer listings, more price cuts, more buyer hesitation, more rentals sitting. If you're outside the state, tell me where you want the next breakdown because the cracks aren't isolated. They're spreading quietly, unevenly, and in real time.